Morning. Hey, good to see everyone. Our Gompa Robsell class. Let's try to set a motivation with words. It also means, it's not merely words. It's to use the words to try to recall the meanings of these things, like taking refuge and generating bodhicitta, that you have exerted yourself in trying to develop earlier, with over some period of time. So just by saying the words, hopefully that can bring back a remembering consciousness of that. Sangye chorang soke chognam la changchu badu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki rola penche sangye dupa sho. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create, through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. Sangye churang soki chunam la, changchu badu dagmi kyapsu chi, dagi chunyen gipe sugnam ki, ola penche sangye dupa sho. Whoever's typing. Whoever's typing should turn off.
Venerable Shanka.
Venerable Shanka, yeah. And then a request, having.
But I'm on mute.
Now, okay, we were hearing your typing somehow.
Huh, okay, I'll put.
O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya. Oh no, first the bundle offering. First we make offering in order to make a request. Say, for instance, if you visit a Lama and you have a request, it's always good to make an offering first, whether it's just a kata or, a Snickers or a butter lamp or butter. By offering this ground anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon, visualized as a Buddha realm, may all migrators enjoy a pure realm. So this is offering to the Buddha, so this is much better than a kata or a Snickers. And then after having offered that, a request, O holy and perfect pure Lamas, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Chitar Sampe Dulje Zimbala. So Chitar Sampa, just in accordance with the word needs, is sort of interpreted there. Idam Guru Rana Mandalakam Niryatayami. Okay. Richard has joined us. Hi, Richard. Good to see you. Let's begin with a little meditation. Try to relax your body. Relax your mind. Recognizing your respiration. Utilize the mental factor of mindfulness enhanced with introspection, the mental factor of introspection, to keep the respiration in mind exclusively, trying to not be distracted by other thoughts. You've been a little successful in calming the mind. Bring your attention to the more subtle object of your mental consciousness. How do you recognize the consciousness? By recognizing its conventional nature. That it doesn't offer any resistance to the emergence or dissolution of mental events, images, thoughts, conversations in your mind. Training yourself such that whatever appears to your mind while trying to do this, you're able to use that to recall the meaning of this conventional nature, that the mind is, let's say, conventionally empty of any resistance. There is no resistance to the emergence of thoughts or their reabsorption. So letting go of them, of your holding onto those thoughts, try to stabilize on the conventional clear light nature of the mind. And remember the meaning of this to see if you can recall the feeling of joy that comes along with recognizing that you can change. You can get rid of faults. You can develop any quality that you now think you lack. And that it's due to this auspicious moment of leisure and endowment, this life of leisure and endowment, which is sometimes called perfect human rebirth, that we have now. It's due to this that we're able to recognize that conventional clear light nature with its attendant significance, that we can develop in this lifetime the causes for future human rebirths, absolute minimum, or let's say absolute minimum, not to create the karma to be born in future lives, to resolve to abstain from negative actions, even those that you've become accustomed to, because they can lead to rebirth in the lower realms, enhancing that to creating virtuous karma to be born as a human in future lifetimes. But as the Buddha suggested, the two main important uses of this life of leisure and endowment are to develop liberation, to achieve nirvana, or to achieve enlightenment, even in a short lifetime, or at least the causes of them, the principal causes of them, principal causes of renunciation of nirvana being renunciation, and the practice of the three higher trainings, and the principal causes of enlightenment being bodhicitta, and the practice of the six perfections, or summarized in the three Mahayana moralities of abstaining from negative actions, collecting virtuous dharmas, and benefiting sentient beings. we don't intuitively have, unless you have imprints, very strong imprints from previous lifetimes, an innate wish to achieve enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. So we have to have heard this from the Buddha, how this Mahayana mind, this great vehicle mind, is so precious and beneficial for oneself and for sentient beings. And after understanding that importance, that the value of developing that, recognizing the method to achieve that is through the collections of merit and wisdom that the Buddha explained in his Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. That Nagarjuna, in his Fundamental Wisdom and other texts, elaborated on. And particularly Buddhapalita and Chandrakirti expounded on in their expositions on the fundamental wisdom. Here we're dealing with one of Chandrakirti's two commentaries, not his word commentary, the Prasanapada, but his meaning commentary, the Majjhimakavatara, and its commentary by Lama Tsongkhapa, Gompa Rapsel, illumination of the intent, of the intention. Think that just this material itself, just listening to it passively like a pigeon in the rafters, leaves imprints to realize, to follow the teachings on emptiness in future lifetimes, let alone if we investigate the teachings, analyze them, try to put them into practice, the immense amount of merit that we accumulate and the immense amount of collection of wisdom that we accumulate. Motivating this way, thinking, I'm going to participate today, listening, contemplating, meditating on the material, not being distracted, but in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. So how does that come about? Through listening, contemplating, meditating, we accumulate the collections of merit and wisdom, which are the cooperative conditions to achieve the two Buddha bodies, the Dharmakaya and the Rupakaya. The Rupakaya having both Sambhogakaya and Nirmanakaya versions, the enjoyment body that emanates for the sake of Arya Bodhisattvas. And the Nirmanakayas that emanate for the welfare of all other sentient beings. I think I'm going to participate in order to achieve those states for the sake of sentient beings who, like us, are immersed in the ocean of samsara, flailing around. When a fiberglass lid of a container comes by and you hold on to it, you think, oh, this is real happiness. I have some stability, some samsaric happiness. That's actually the nature of suffering. I think I'm going to achieve enlightenment in order to extricate mother sentient beings from the ocean of samsara and place them into everlasting blissful happiness of enlightenment. That's my purpose in participating today. Okay, thank you. Subhash has joined us. Hi, Subhash. Good to see you. So, yeah, how are we doing? Tomorrow is the full moon of Sakadawa, this month of in which the Buddha was born on this full moon in the fourth lunar month, according to the calendars. He achieved enlightenment also on this very day, and he passed away on this day. So it's said that this confluence of events that took place on this day make or tomorrow rather, the full moon of Sakadawa, means that any karma that you create tomorrow will be multiplied, I think, as much as any other, more than any other of the Buddhist holidays. Is that right? I don't know of any other of the Buddhist holy days in which the karma is multiplied as much. So if you have a chance to practice or make offerings tomorrow, that's excellent. So before we begin, anyone have any questions or comments, observations about our meditation? John does. Yeah.
Yes, Venerable George, this is thinking about generating merit in this season and especially tomorrow. And I think in the context maybe of searching for, or maybe it was at the anniversary of the passing of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, but it was suggested to recite or read the Manjushri Namasangiti. I seem to remember, and I wanted to just ask if you could just briefly address why that scripture is so treasured by the Vajrayana traditions.
Right. So there are many other sutras that are treasured in general, like the Vajrachetaka, the Vajracutter Sutra, or the Golden Light Sutra that Lama Zopa Rinpoche tried to popularize and so forth. But the Manjushri Namasangriti is a text that can be interpreted on both the sutra and the tantric levels. And the tantric meanings of it, there are His Holiness has given teachings on that in the past, on the commentaries on the Manjushri Namasangriti from the point of view of Tantra. So that's one thing. So it's revered because of that. Its immense profundity, both in terms of sutra and tantra, and also because of the merit that's accrued to develop wisdom, to develop karmic connection with Manjushri, and to create the karma to have all of these conditions in a future lifetime, to be intelligent, to have no hindrances, whether it be by your physical gender or anything else, that in the future that you'll be able to practice very straightforwardly. So that's what comes to mind in terms of that. But that's not the only thing. I think in particular for Lama Zopa Rinpoche, that may have been the observation by the Kandrila, the female adept, who was a very close associate of Lama Zopa Rinpoche and other lamas, that was a particular good thing to say there. But tomorrow, that's good. But also, it would be good to recite any of the Buddhist scriptures. And I'd like to ask Doris if she would put up this PDF that, with the help of Bhikshu Pasadika, who translated the text from Tibetan into English. This is the text of Nagarjuna's Sutra Samuccaya. Not the whole. This is not the whole text. This is the section. This is the, what is it called? I think this is the last section, the 10th theme. There are 10 themes in the text, or you say 10 chapters. Here it says, the Sutra Samuccaya, Nagarjuna's anthology of quotations from discourses. That means from the sutras. The English translation is by Bhikkhu Pasadika. So he was, I think, where was he, Paul or John, do you know? I think, was it Sri Lanka or Thailand? I can't remember which is. He's actually, I think, an American, if I'm not mistaken, who took ordination early on and began translating. And so this is, as I mentioned, they're reformatted with American spellings and formatting. Okay, so here are this 10th theme is the utmost rareness of beings who are resolutely intent on the vehicle of oneness. So the context of why this was created was earlier in our text, just before where we're going to start today. There was a statement by Lama Tsong Khapa saying that, where was it? Okay, I can't find it immediately. That Lama Tsong Khapa said, although one of the important features that was mentioned was the ekayana, the one vehicle, he wasn't going to elaborate about it here in this text in Goparapsal, because it was explained by Nagarjuna in his Sutra Samuccaya. So that was the reason for providing this PDF. So this has many quotations, just this one document. So say, for instance, John or others, if you wanted to create merit through reciting or reading sutras or sutra passages, this would be one in particular that you can go through reading these. Yeah, so we'll mention a little bit more on this coming Monday in discussion group about one of the sutras that has an enormously long name. I think it's on the 4th or 5th or 6th page.
Page 6.
Page 6. What is it? The Sarva Dharma Alupalamba Chetana Ratna Samuccaya Nirdesa Sutra. So as Paul mentioned when I sent him a copy of this, he said that's quite a mouthful. In the notes in Bhikkhu Pasadika's actual translation, it mentions there's a Chinese title of this. So this sutra doesn't exist in Sanskrit to anyone's knowledge now. It might be in some stupa in Tibet, but he mentioned that in the Chinese translation of the Sutra Samuccaya, that exists. There's a Tibetan translation of the Sutra Samuccaya, that exists, but there's no Sanskrit of the Sutra Samuccaya. But in the Chinese translation, the title of this text is more brief. And so if you're interested, you can come on Monday and we can discuss that. But I wanted to share this with you, especially for tomorrow. Something else that you might like to recite. Read those passages and contemplate on their meaning. So this is talking about the Buddhist concept of there being one final vehicle, not three final vehicles as in the lower schools. Okay. And Nadine, you might like to recite those. I know you like to read and recite the sutras, yeah. Okay, so any questions? Any other questions before we begin? Suvansh has that anticipatory. Do you have some question, Suvansh? No, okay. Okay, so we are at a section right now in the text in Jimpa's translation, page 388, and in Venerable Joan Nicel's translation, the FPMT translation, page 222. And later, when Diana or others that have the digital translations and that don't have the page numbers on them, this is the section you can search for this heading, showing through reason how such a statement is provisional. So what statement is this talking about? Yeah, so what we talked about before was giving scriptural citations that affirmed that when the Buddha taught mind only, that there's no external world, and that the mind was inherently existent, that this was a provisional teaching. So there were quotations from the Dashabhumika, the Ten Bhumi Sutra, and the Sutra Alamkara, and I think maybe there was something also from the Samdi Nimurchana or other sutras. There are many, many places that affirm that this, that you can find in scriptural citations where the Buddha explained when he taught this, it had an ulterior motive when he taught mind only. Now, this is trying to show that these teachings on mind only are interpretable or provisional. It's just different ways of translating the same term through reasoning. So the text says, to elucidate through reasoning how the statement about, quote, mind only, unquote, is provisional, is interpretable. The text says in stanza 696, once cognizable objects are shown to be no more, the negation of cognition is easily obtained. The negation of cognition is easily obtained, the Buddha said. The Buddhas said. If there is no object, cognition is easily negated as a consequence. So the Buddhas first negated the objects of cognition. So, So what is this saying? This is supposedly a reasoning to show that the mind only is only interpretable. So the idea is that when you talk about our minds, how we know, we always have a knower and an object known. You can't have a consciousness without having something that it's cognizing. If it's not cognizing anything, that consciousness doesn't arise, right? You might have a sense power without the consciousness there or whatever, but if you don't have an object, you won't have a consciousness. And so if you can show that there is no object, say for instance through the Chittamatra provisional teaching, that there's no external reality, so that if you at first as a provisional, as a sort of as a stepping stone, you tell the Buddha taught there's no external reality, so those objects don't exist, so therefore that is a way of leading one slowly into realizing that the consciousness that would realize such a thing is not inherently existing. Why that's true is a little bit tricky. We'll be talking about that. So this verse is translated by Venerable Joan the following way. The Buddhas say, so it's plural, Sangye Namgi, the Buddhas say, quote, if objects of knowledge do not exist, Sheja Mena, so the Jimpa says, shown to be no more. So rather than using the literal Tibetan, the Buddhists say, quote, if objects of knowledge do not exist, if they are no more, the elimination of consciousness is easily acquired. I say the refutation of a truly existent consciousness is easily acquired. Since if objects of knowledge do not exist, the refutation of consciousness is established. Initially, there is the refutation of the object of knowledge. Let me say that for myself again. Since if objects of knowledge do not exist, there's no object of knowledge, the refutation of the consciousness is established initially. The refutation of consciousness is established initially. There is the refutation of the object of knowledge. Did I get that right? Is that what? That's on page 222. The Buddhists say, if objects of knowledge do not exist, the elimination of consciousness is easily acquired. Since if objects of knowledge do not exist, the refutation of consciousness is established. Initially, there is the refutation of objects of knowledge. Okay, not particularly clear to me what that means. So with regard to this, Geshe Zopa gave some commentary on this in July 23rd, my birthday, in 2003 in the morning. So in this section entitled A Summary That Concludes the Refutation, so this is talking about an earlier verse. So we're at verse 696, right? So this is commentary that Geshe gave July 23rd, 2003 in the morning on verse 671, the final two lines of that, which are relevant here. It's saying the same thing. In that point, it said, in brief, this is the point. Just as there is no cognizable object, understand that there is no cognizing mind either. And Geshe said, this is similar to the verse that we're talking about here now, 696, the first two lines, where it says, the Buddhas taught, when objects of knowledge do not exist, the elimination of consciousness is easily acquired. So Geshe said, just as the external object does not inherently exist. Okay, so in mind only, if the external object does not exist, usually we don't say it doesn't inherently exist. If the external object does not exist as it appears, right? As distinct from the mind. It does exist. We say there are external objects, but it doesn't exist as an entity different than the mind. What do you think, Richard? Does that mean that the Chittamatra is accepting that because that doesn't exist, that it doesn't inherently exist?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
So in general, they would say dependent phenomena inherently exist, the Chittamatra.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the mind inherently exists. Dependent phenomena inherently exist.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were talking about externality, external objects that are a different entity than the mind,
Mm-hmm.
they do not exist.
Mm-hmm.
You say that they do not inherently exist, even though generally they exist.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
If the external objects are dependently originated, then according to the Chittamatrans, they inherently exist.
Right, but external objects that are a different entity to the mind, are they dependent? Do such things exist for Chittamatra?
No.
Objects that are a different entity than the mind?
No.
No, they don't exist. Therefore, you could say they don't inherently exist,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
So
Correct.
that's what Geshe-la's was saying. Just as the external object does not inherently exist, in the same way, the subject consciousness also does not inherently exist. So this is kind of the segue into the connection between showing that if the outer, so as a stepping stone, the Buddha taught Chittamatra first, that there's no external objects. So one could understand through this that they don't inherently exist. And then upon analysis, you could also analyze that the consciousness that would imagine that it observes them doesn't inherently exist. If the subject is inherently existent, then the object should also be inherently existent. So this phrase that we talked about before, yonam menyam, do you remember that? What happened to Mikhail? Mikhail disappeared. I hope he's not having internet problems. What does yonam menyam mean? Anyone? Savash, do you remember? John, do you remember?
Don't. Yowa as in like,
No, yoba like existent.
oh,
Yeah,
yub,
yeah, isn't it-
yunam, oh, so existent and non-existence, or plural.
Oh, I think it wasn't it? If one exists, then both exist. If or
Right. I may have mispronounced it. Yona yonam. So if
Right.
that means yona means if one exists,
Yona.
yonyam, the other is equally existent. So if
Right.
there's a equality of quality, let's say, of the consciousness and the object that it perceives. If one is impermanent, the other will be impermanent. If one exists, the other exists. So that's the main criteria here. So yonam, equal to exist, both equally should be. Mena menyam, if one does not exist, say for instance, if there is not a consciousness, if there is not an object of knowledge that's a different entity than the mind, then the mind that perceives that should not exist either. Mena nyam. So nyam, how is that spelled? I think there's a mao prefix, right?
Oh,
Meow, mao, nya.
yum.
Yeah.
Mao and Yama and Yum. Yeah.
Oh, mao and yama.
Equal. Yeah, there's a mao prefix. So menam. If one it does not exist, equally both are equally non-existent. The Prasangika tries to prove that here. This is the brief meaning. So that was Geshe-la's commentary to that stanza. Yeah.
And so,
So he was quoting back to, so you can check in your text. I don't have the page number here, but verse 671. So usually you can find the verses in Jimpa's text. The last two lines, I think this is Jimpa's translation. In brief, this is the point. Just as there is no cognizable object, understand that there is no cognizing mind either. So that was what Geshe-la brought up at that point. Sorry, I interrupted someone, was it? John, were you saying?
you've clarified it. Thank you. I think I get it.
Okay. So how are we doing? Making sense? Somewhat? Okay. Nadine's nodding. Suvash, you okay? Yeah, okay. So Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary now continues, often quoting Chandrakirti or paraphrasing Chandrakirti's Bhasham. as a skillful means to help lead them to the truth of suchness, to lead disciples to the truth of suchness, the Buddhas first exposed those with good stores of merit to discourses on the practice of generosity and the like. Okay, so as a skillful means to lead them to suchness, even the Buddha taught conventional things which are interpretable, let's say karma and impermanence, the inevitability of death, the possibility of achieving liberation and enlightenment and so forth. All of these things exist conventionally, and any discourse about them we'll see is to be interpreted with respect to its ultimate meaning. They still have meaning conventionally, and they still are literally true on the conventional level, but they are not definitive statements. But in order to lead people to the understanding of emptiness, the Buddha taught conventional truths, how to take care of your karma and so forth and so on, in order that sentient beings accumulate merit. And as a result of that merit, they'll be able to, with that store of good stores of merit, they'll be able to understand the discourses on emptiness. So a skillful means to help lead them to the truth of suchness, to emptiness. The Buddhists first exposed those with good stores of merit to discourses on the practice of generosity and the like. So even to hear the discourses on generosity, which allow you to collect merit to realize emptiness, you need to have stores of merit from other lifetimes. In the same manner, with respect to those trainees who do not have the capacity to realize the full meaning of the profound truth right from the start, right? That would be like us, right? The full meaning right from the start without explanation. The Buddhists lead them toward the realization of no intrinsic existence gradually. The Buddha's teachings lead sentient beings to the final understanding that there's no inherent existence gradually through various steps. To such trainees, Jimpa translates, once cognizable objects, that is to say, external reality, are first shown to be no more, right? Say through the Chittamatra. Everyone else below Chittamatra says all of these external objects definitely exist. External objects exist. Chittamatra posits that there's no external reality. This was a skillful means to such trainees, once cognizable objects, that is, external reality, are first shown to be no more through the Chittamatra logic, that they're not existing as they appear to be as different entities from the mind. Then negation of intrinsically existing cognition is easily obtained. So the Buddhas have said, Jimba's translation, this being so, the absence of the cognizable, in other words, negating external reality from the outset, is a means to help induce full realization of selflessness. So in other words, this is talking about the Chittamatra position from the very beginning, negating external reality, that there's no external reality. This is a skillful means to lead people to the full realization of selflessness. Because if there's no external object, it's not that external, that's a different entity than the mind. That external object does not exist inherently, and therefore you can, through analysis, you can also understand that the mind that cognizes it is also not inherently existent. Mena, menam, if one does not exist, the other, say of the two, a cognizer and an object of cognition, if one does not exist, the other does not exist. So the Buddhists first taught the negation of external objects of cognition alone. For if there is no object, that is, if the selflessness of external reality has been understood, if there's no external object, that means ultimately, right? If the selflessness of external reality has been understood, cognition is easily negated as a consequence. That is, that you can easily negate that the consciousness is inherently existent, even though at the beginning, that's a Chittamatra position. Chittamatra position is that the consciousness does inherently exist. That is to say, the selflessness of consciousness will be easily established. Okay, so this is a very deep section, and Lama Tsongkhapa is going through it relatively quickly. Geshe Zopa gave some some commentaries about the coming verses. Let me just read how FPMT, how Venerable Joan translated this. Regarding that, just as they initially apply discourse on generosity, they provide a discourse on generosity and so forth, the other perfections, as a means for those who have accumulated merit to easily engage in reality. Like in the same way, likewise, the Buddhas gradually guide those trainees, lead those trainees who are initially unable to realize the complete profound meaning. The Buddhas gradually lead them to the realization of the lack of inherent existence. That's more or less how Jimpa had taken the meaning of that. To such trainees, the Buddha said, if first it is taught that external objects of knowledge do not exist, this would be like, for instance, the Chittamatra position. Afterwards, the elimination of consciousness as inherently existent is easily acquired. So when the word easily comes here, you might think that understanding the statement is easy, but what it just means that if you're able to negate the object, you will be able to, at that point, easily prove that the consciousness does not inherently exist. But that proof is a little more complicated. Hence, because the absence of objects of knowledge, that is, the initial refutation of external objects, is also a method to completely realize selflessness, right? Even though that initial Chittamatra position from the Prasangika point of view, from the final point of view is wrong, it is a method to completely realize selflessness. The Buddhas initially teach just the realization of external objects of knowledge, the refutation. They teach just the refutation of external objects of knowledge, because if objects of knowledge do not exist, those who understand the selflessness of external objects refute consciousness. That is to say, they easily establish its selflessness, the selflessness of the mind. Okay. Making sense verbally so far? Don, what do you think?
It sounds to me like we have these two objects, consciousness and the object of consciousness,
Right.
that exist at the same time. If one doesn't exist, the other doesn't exist. It's sort of the definition of same nature, isn't it?
Do they exist at the same time?
I think so.
The consciousness that realizes an object exists the same time as the object? If it were, they would be the same nature. What your intuition is right there, or your memory of
Yeah, that's what I'm
but
saying.
they don't exist at the same time. Any consciousness always is a result of the object, cognizing the object, right? The cognition of an object is an effect because it's impermanent phenomena, right? What has to come first, the consciousness or the object. The object has to be present first, right? And then the cognition can arise. The next moment after that, let's say the object exists at time A, or time 1, okay? At that moment, the consciousness of that object has not yet arisen. The consciousness of that object arises the very next thought moment as an effect of that aspect being presented to the cognition. Okay, so they are not the same nature. The cognition and the object of cognition are not the same nature. If they existed at the same time, as Chittamatra believe, they would be the same nature. And that is the Chittamatra position, that they do exist at the same time, and they are the same, they're the nature of the mind, that the appearance of external reality is the nature of the mind. But Prasangika says that's not the case because they don't exist at the same time. Making sense? You'll have maybe think about that to grok that. Okay.
We'll grok it.
Yeah. KT, what do you think? Making sense?
Yeah, I think I'm following a bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for some that last little part though, and I appreciate Don bringing that up. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So Richard, is that a questioning mudra? Oh, you understand? Okay. Okay. So let's continue. Lama Tsongkhapa's translation, according to Jimba, continues. Among those who have awareness of no intrinsic existence of external reality, among those who have awareness of no inherent existence of external reality. So in other words, among those who realize that external reality does not inherently exist or intrinsically exist, the same meaning, some will realize no intrinsic existence of cognition on their own. Some of those people who have realized that external reality is not inherently existent. Yeah, so there are various degrees here. So very gross level would mean just realizing that because there is no external reality that's a different entity than the mind, that doesn't exist. Therefore, it doesn't inherently exist. That's not really a realization of the emptiness of that, right? That's just because something does, like say, for instance, if there's no elephant in my room, there's no inherently existent elephant in my room, right? You could realize that. But realizing that there's no inherently existent elephant in my room is not a realization of the emptiness of an elephant, right? Okay. So this is just on a gross level. Among those who have awareness of no intrinsic existence of external reality. So there could be different people. People of the Chittamatra who just simply realize that there's no inherently existent external object that's a different entity than the mind. And those who have been exposed to the Majjhimika, the Majjhamaka, and realize that there is that external reality doesn't inherently exist. There are two different levels there. Among those, some will realize no intrinsic existence of cognition on their own, while others will realize this on the basis of a brief explanation by another. So when we talk about how realizations come about, sometimes you can have realizations using your own logic. Sometimes it has to be explained to you by another, or a proof statement has to be provided to you by another. Yeah. So continuing, that the statement about the non-existence of external reality and the intrinsic existence of cognition are provisional, is clearly stated in the commentary on awakening mind as well. Okay, so how did we finish that? So this was a reasoning. This was a reasoning to show how mind only is only provisional. So this was that verse 696 was supposedly that reasoning. Now we're changing tack here. That the statement about the non-existence of external reality and the intrinsic existence of the cognition are provisional is also clearly stated in the commentary on awakening mind. This is the commentary on bodhicitta by Nagarjuna. So this is a very profound text also. So this verse that's being quoted here is yeah. Where are we talking about? We're talking about So this is verse 27. Jimpa notes in his note 696. Bodhicitta Nivarana, verse 27. So if you happen to have a commentary, this English translation, you can look at this. So this says, all of this is but one's mind, quote unquote. That which was stated by the able one is to alleviate the fear of the childish, the immature spiritually, the chipa. It is not a statement of final truth. This is verse 27 from the Bodhicitta, what is it? Vivarana. So let's see right here. So right after that, it says, Aryadeva states this explicitly in his Compendium of the Heart of Gnosis as well. And so Jimpa has two notes there, 696 and 697. So the note 697 in Jimpa's text says, you can see it at the end of your text. He says, Tsong is probably referring here to the part where immediately after presenting the core position of Chittamatra, the text presents the final view of the Madhyamaka by way of critiquing Chittamatra. So he also says, although the Tibetan tradition attributes the compendium of the essence of wisdom, this is Jnana Sara Samuchaya. Sara can mean essence or core or quintessence or substance. Jnana Sara Samuchaya. So that's the compendium of the essence of gnosis or wisdom. Although the Tibetan tradition attributes the compendium of the essence of wisdom to Aryadeva, who is the author of the famed 400 stanzas of yogic behavior or bodhisattvas. We mentioned many times the 400s. Given the explicit reference to the dispute over whether the sensory cognitions perceive their objects by way of bearing aspects or akara of the objects, as well as the explicit listing of the key tenets of Chittamatra school, ascription of this work to Aryadeva is problematic at best. So, so the commentaries, although Lama Tsongkhapa is sort of giving credence to this text, the Tibetan scholars think it may not actually have been written by Aryadeva because Aryadeva wouldn't have been positing these particular kinds of statements. You can see it in that note there. Is that okay? Making sense? Mikhail, you okay?
Is it because Aryadeva was very early in the millennia. I mean, I think 3rd century or something, or 4th, or something like that. And Asanga and the Chittamatra was much later.
Well, no, the sutras mention mind only, right? So the mind only school as a luk, as a tradition, as a school, only came about when a Sangha came back from Tushita's heaven with a text from Maitreya and portrayed this as a system. Still, that was in the time of Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna also critiques mind only, saying that it's provisional. Aryadeva would also have that position, that they didn't accept that the mind only position in the Dashabhumika and the Lakavatara Sutra, where it says, the 3 realms are mind only. Kamsum Semsambhavo, the three realms are only mind. They wouldn't accept that as a definitive teaching. Yeah.
But the dispute about the akara aspect is
Right.
later.
No, I think that's.
I mean, it seems to be the problem why we can't say that text is from Aryadeva.
Yeah, that's one of the things. So here it says, given the explicit reference to the dispute over whether our sensory cognition perceive their objects by way of bearing aspects of the objects. So generally, Prasangika would say, Chittamatra would say, there are no aspects like that. Whereas the Prasangika position is that there always is an aspect that's presented to the sense base, the sense faculty, that acts as the object that you are perceiving. Say, for instance, your eye consciousness doesn't actually go out to the tree outside there. There is an aspect of the tree, an appearance of the tree on your sense faculty, let's say in the retina of your eye, and it's that the consciousness is perceiving. So that's only one of the 2 things. This is the dispute over that, as well as the explicit listing of the key tenets of the Chittamatra school. So in that text that's attributed to Aryadeva, so the scholars say that's sounds maybe a little bit fishy. Maybe that wasn't Aryadeva that wrote that because of these particular things. But Lama Tsongkhapa seems to be accepting it here. What do you think, Suvash? What are you thinking?
So I'm looking at this paragraph, right, that we just covered, and saying that when we were first taught in earlier courses that, like you said, object and consciousness, right? 3 things have to come together for a consciousness to arise, right? Just like you said.
Right.
Now, when I was first exposed to that, and even today, when I'm described that situation, I don't tend to think of that in terms of inherent existence, right? I just tend to take the fact that the 3 of them come together as 3 things coming together, right?
Yeah, you don't think that you think of it as inherently existent, but that doesn't mean, if you talk to someone at the cafe down in town or at the supermarket or in the bar,
right, exactly.
Conceive of things as inherently existent, say, oh, heck no, or maybe something.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't even know what that means, but that doesn't mean that they don't grasp at those things as inherently existent. We're still grasping at them as inherently existent.
Correct. So now when I read the paragraph and it says, well, the Buddha used this as a stepping stone to show first that the object doesn't inherently exist, and therefore the cognition doesn't inherently exist. I mean, that That's still, difficult for me to
Yeah,
grasp.
yeah. That's,
It's
that's what I
not
said at the beginning.
straightforward.
So the word easily, the selflessness of the consciousness can be easily understood. I said that easily doesn't refer. That just means that once you've realized this reasoning, uh, you can easily realize that the consciousness is not inherently existent. But the reasoning itself is not easy, which you're actually showing right there. So it's not intuitively obvious why this is the case. Let's read a little bit further here. Let me see if I've got all of that stated there. So yeah. Okay. So now the next section, new outline. So we've just finished the short section on showing through reason how such a statement is provisional, showing how mind only not only is proved, is it, can be shown to be provisional or interpretable through the scriptures, but also through reasoning. We just did through the reasoning. Now a new section, how to recognize the provisional or the interpretable and the definitive meaning of the sutras. So in the Tibetan, if you're following the Tibetan, it just says Nipani. It says two. So you have to have a great memory, or you have to have the outline in front of you to know what two is. Fortunately, Jimpa has put here, what the actual number, the second outline is. How to recognize the interpretable and definitive meaning of the sutras. So this is very important section, and I'm glad that most of the class is here, because this is sort of like the essence of Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings in his famous Lekshe Ningpo, Drang Ne Lekshe Ningpo. Was it the Paul? How do you translate?
We're doing it the
Lekshe.
essence of eloquence differentiating between the definitive and the interpretable. Something like that.
Drang
Drang
Lekshe
definitive
Ningpo.
and interpretable.
Right.
Lekshe yeah. Essence of eloquence or essence of good explanations. I think originally Jeffrey translated it that way.
So John is up in Robert Thurman's Menla. Is Robert at Menla now?
Yeah, he is.
I asked whether he might drop in, and John said, no, he's in the pool room, so he didn't think that. But we're talking about some texts and a big subject that Robert Thurman spent a lot of time also translating. So the text continues. The first, right at the beginning of this outline, it says, those with intelligence should present other provisional scriptures which do not explicitly teach suchness in its entirety along these same lines. Those with intelligence, who've understood this explanation about, why the statements of mind only and no external reality and the mind inherently existing and so forth, why these are provisional. They've studied it through scripture and through reasoning. So those with intelligence who've understood this should present other provisional sutras which do not explicitly teach suchness in its entirety along the same lines. So in other words, they would have ulterior motives in having presented these other teachings. Some of them can be taken literally. Some of them have to be interpreted. But anyway, we'll see. This is a very complicated subject. To state this, the text says, so this is the next verse, 697. Thus, having understood the account of the scriptures, thus having understood this account of the scriptures through scripture and reasoning, understand those sutras that present what is not true suchness as provisional. You should understand those sutras that present what is not true suchness, as Jimpa translates, is maybe not exactly right, as provisional, and interpret them accordingly. So this is essentially saying that which can be called a definitive sutra, ngedon, is something that teaches emptiness explicitly. That which doesn't teach it explicitly is provisional, is to be interpreted, and it can have if it's the Buddhist teachings, it was meant to lead you to the definitive meaning. And know that they bear on emptiness, and know those that bear on emptiness are definitive. So Venerable Joan translated this more or less the same. Having understood the account of such passages, one should also realize that any sutra whose meaning does not explain suchness is an interpretable meaning, teaching, and then interpret it. Understand that those whose meaning is emptiness are definitive meaning, or of definitive meaning. So she did not put this word, what did Jimpa put? True suchness. So in the Tibetan, what does it say?
It's just Deni.
Deni Mayin. So that which is not suchness. So Venerable Joan's translation, I think, is more exact there when she just says, one should realize any sutra whose meaning does not explain suchness is interpretable meaning. Okay. Making sense? I think Ron is nodding slightly. Okay. Continuing the commentary to this, Lama Tsongkhapa says, thus having understood this account of the provisional and definitive status of the scriptures in terms explained above, mainly we were just talking about the Chittamatra system that was to be interpreted, but this also applies to other statements that the Buddha made. You should understand that all those sutras, you can say, or any passage that the Buddha taught, even if it's within another sutra that can be called a sutra, all those passages that present or have as their content or subject matter what is not true suchness. So here he says, Deni Zokpa Ngosu Mitomba. So here in this place it says complete. Thus, having understood the account of the provisional and definitive status of the scriptures in terms explained above, you should understand that all those sutras that present or have as their content or subject matter what is not true suchness, those that teach provisional truths and do not explicitly elucidate dependent origination, characterized in terms of no arising and so on. What's the beginning of that? You should understand them as provisional. Those citations that don't teach about emptiness, true suchness. You should see them as teaching provisional truths, and do not explicitly elucidate dependent origination, characterized in terms of no arising and so on. What did we say? Non-inherent generation. You should recognize them as provisional and interpret them accordingly. So when sutras, thank you, it reminded me, we'll take a break in a moment. Yeah, so when we talk about interpretable teachings, some of the teachings that are interpretable can be taken literally, like teachings on karma and so forth. Some of the teachings that are interpretable can't be taken literally, but we're going into that detail in a moment. So continuing, recognize such teachings as being similar to those that serve as conditions for later entering the realization of emptiness of intrinsic existence. Okay. So that means that as we said before, some of these teachings, the provisional teachings, are meant to be means to create the condition for you to eventually enter the realization of emptiness of intrinsic existence. Okay. So then there's a quotation from, as Jimpo translates, hymn to the world transcendent. What is this? This is one of the praises, right? What do we call these? The topa. How do they usually translate topa, John? Do you remember?
You mean English translation?
Yeah.
Like a hymn or a praise, I think, It is a praise, right? A stotra. Is that right? Stotra?
Yeah. So usually this is translated as, oh, let's see. Yeah. There are, I think, there are five, John, how many? Five texts of praises by Nagarjuna or hymns by Nagarjuna?
Yeah, that sounds right, Venerable George.
I think there were five of these. And so in this particular one, Jiktenle Depe Toba, which is the, is the Loka Atita Stava. So this stava here is praise or hymn. So Jimpa translates that as the great elements are not perceived by the eye. So this is a statement by Nagarjuna, right? The great elements are not perceived by the eye. What are the great elements? Do you know, Richard, the great elements are? If I added the word four, the four great elements, what would they be?
They would be earth, air, wind, fire. Is that right?
Yeah, right. The four, these elements. So those are fundamental elements. They are not objects perceived by the eye. Okay. What are they perceived by? Are they perceived? Do you know, Mikhail, how the great elements are perceived? Are any of them perceived?
Not individually. They have to pack together to be perceivable, I think.
How about the earth element?
Oh, they go in together. They are not never alone. They come in
But
aggregation.
can't you perceive the earth? Can't you perceive the fire element with a tactile sense?
Yeah, sure.
You can't perceive them by the eye. That's what's being said.
Oh, yeah. Oh, see.
Great elements are not perceived by the eye. Doesn't mean they're not perceived.
Mhm.
So how can their derivatives be perceived by the eye? So what Mikhail is referring here is in Tibetan we say the Jungwa. What is that in Tibetan? Bhuta, the elements, or the Mahabhuta, the great elements, and that which arises from the elements means, as Mikhail was referring, when any kind of visible object or auditory object or tactile object, anything that we perceive in the world is not composed only of the great elements. It always is a combination of the various elements. And in that way, it becomes cognizable. The great elements are not perceived by the eye, so how can their derivatives, that which arises, the secondary, objects, how can they be perceived by the eye? Oh, you would think that why does that follow? Speaking of material form in this manner, you, Buddha, clearly prevent grasping at form. So, yeah, Buddha, and what is the Jungyur in Sanskrit? Anyone know? I don't think it has Jungyur in the Tibetan here. Jungyur is what means the derivatives. Jungnang Miksuk or Mikzung Mayin Na, if the elements, the Jungwa, are not perceived, Dejung Mikzung Jita She. So the Jung here means that which arises from them is also not perceived. So Jimpa, so this verse was translated, this is verse number 5 in this text by Nagarjuna. Lintner, the famous translator, translated it this way: the four great elements are imperceptible to the eye. So how can the visible, how can that which is visible consist of them? That's how he takes it. Speaking thus of form, you rejected the belief in form. And I want to just read the next sentence here. So the sutras also state, quote, the meaning of impermanence is non-existence. Okay, so we're going to take a break in a second, but just let me explain what this is. There are two quotations here. One is from the text by Nagarjuna. How else do we translate? What do we usually translate this as? Him to the world transcended, the praise of the Jikten Le Depa, right? What is this? Jikten Le Depe Tuba. So the praise to the, praise to the supramundane. That's how it's sometimes translated. Praise to the supramundane. It's not talking about supramundane truth. It's praise to the Buddha, who is supramundane. But that in that text, many stanzas, this is stanza 5, I guess I said, that's there. But now there's another statement, another sutra, you could say another citation from the sutras, which are not identified here. In Jimpa's note 699 says that it doesn't, neither Chandrakirti nor Lama Tsongkhapa identify what sutras. We've run across this many times, right? Where they say the Buddha said, but they never say where he said it. Maybe lost in over the millennia. The sutras also state, quote, the meaning of impermanence is non-existence. That's one way of translating that statement. We'll see when we get back. Okay, so let's take a little break. I'm going to go off camera, but I'm keeping my microphone on and listening to any good debates that take place. Okay, we're back. So we had a nice little break. One question Mikhail and John were discussing about was the great elements, whether they are objects of the senses So the great elements, the four great elements, as I I think I'd asked Don, right? Did I ask Don what the four elements were? When I added
Oh,
the four.
you asked, I think Paul,
Okay.
you
Oh,
asked.
someone else. Anyway, the four elements. If I added the word four, then they got it. Oh, no, it was Richard. Richard. Yeah. So, who's somehow disappeared. I guess he's had to gone off. So, the four elements, the four great elements, earth, water, fire, and air, are when we talk about the definitions of them, the definition of the earth element is that which is hard and supporting. The fire element is that which is hot and burning. So each of those definitions have its nature and its function. So fire is that which is hot, that's its nature, and burning, that's its function. Air is that which is what? What's the definition of air? Do you know, Nadine? In that same context, there are two terms. That which is light, meaning not heavy, light and moving. Its nature is being, light and it's moving. And what's left? Fire, air, earth, water. Water is that which is what? Wetting and cohesive, something like that. So anyway, those elements are not perceived by the eye consciousness. When you see outer objects, although they include the four elements to some degree, everything has some fire elements, some air elements, some earth elements, so forth. Although they include those, they're not perceptible by the eye, the elements, whereas those elements are perceptible by the tactile consciousness, such as the what do we say? Heat element, fire, heat element, the fire element, and so forth. Okay, so that's something that we were talking about there. Okay, how are we doing? Making sense? Okay. Yeah, Louise has a question.
Just quick question. What's consciousness definition, nature and function?
Oh, yeah. Who knows? This Nadine knows. What's the definition of consciousness?
It which is clear and knowing.
That which is clear and knowing. So same sense, the clarity is referring to its nature, the clear light nature of the mind, and its function is to know that which is clear and knowing. What's that in Tibetan? Do you know, Nadine?
Sorry. I'm sorry, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, it's okay. John, what is it?
Selwa Tang Sheba?
Selshing Rikpa.
Selshing Rikpa, we always say, yeah. So in the course on Lojong, on mind and mental factors, the definition of consciousness, Shepa, is that which is clear and knowing. Sel, Shing means and, Rikpa means knowing. Okay, so that they're all those definitions like that are not all definitions have that, but many definitions have these two faculties. One is two facets, one being its nature of what is being defined and what is its function. That kind of is the defining characteristics of it. Okay, so we've got these two quotations. One, what was talked about from the praise to the supramundane, or as Jimpa translates, hymn to the world transcendent. We've just gone over that. And then this other citation from the sutras, or from sutra, which is not identified, says the sutras also state that the meaning of impermanence is non-existence. So I think I already read that note 699. neither Chandrakirti nor Tsongkhapa, Jimba says, neither Chandrakirti nor Tsongkhapa identify the source sutra here. They just state that it is in the sutras. The meaning of impermanence is also explained in terms of the absence of intrinsic existence. Okay, so now sort of quite interesting. Okay, so now Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on the first citation, the one from the Praise to the Supramundane. The way in which the first citation presents logical reason is this. The Buddha taught in the Abhidharma that the four elements are tactile phenomena. Stated explicitly, right, Mikhail? They are tactile phenomena, and are thus not visible objects of the eye. So why is that? Why are tactile objects not the object of the eye? Doris, do you want to make a stab?
Well, visible objects are color and shape.
Right, shape and color. They don't include, so each of the faculties has its own domain. The ear perceives sounds. The eyes do not perceive sounds. The nose does not perceive sounds. The tongue does not, the body does not perceive. You might say that you can sense when say someone who's deaf can sense that there's sound because of the vibration, but that's not the not the meaning there. The way in which the first citation presents logical reason is this. The Buddha taught in the Abhidharma that the four elements are tactile phenomena and are thus not visible objects of the eye, while their derivative, the visible form, is a visible object. So in the Tibetan, he does say, Jungwa shi mikiyu mimpe rekshadang dele jungwe jungyur. So the jungyur means the derivatives that arise from those elements. There he actually uses the jungyur. The Buddha taught in the Abhidharma that the four elements are tactile phenomena and are thus not visible objects of the eyes, while their derivative or derivatives, the visible form, is a visible object. So visible forms are composed of these four elements. Are they composed of anything else? Is it only the four elements? How does it go? Does anyone remember?
The basic atom or molecule or aggregate would be composed of 8. The 4 great elements and the 4, I don't know how to call that, the sensibilia, something like that, which is the corresponding atoms for each sense. So visible, smell, touch, and taste, but not the sound.
Right.
Sound is not one of those. It's not made of atoms.
Right. Nadine, was that what you were going to say? Or how would you put it?
I thought, in addition to fire, water, earth, and so on, there's also space and consciousness?
No, so no, they're not included here. So when we talk about Michaela is saying, generally, say you start with the four elements, and then things that are actually composed of the four elements have 8. Says you could say molecules. They're kind of like something greater than the atoms or the particles. They're composed of 8 things. The 4 elements, the 4 great elements, and what are the 4 other things? Did you say the material of the sense bases? What did you say?
I don't know that atoms corresponding to the senses. I don't know how to. I think George Dreyfus say something like sensibilia. I don't know. I don't know the term.
Okay. So
sense.
those molecules are comprised of eight substances, the four elements of these four sensibilities or whatever, sensibles. And then anything else is comprised of these molecules. So somehow in everything that we perceive, there are the four great elements and these other abilities. Paul, do you know what Dreyfus might have translated those other things as, or what Jeffrey translates them as?
I think the word Mikhail was saying was sensibilia. Was how
Sensibilia.
that's how George was translating it. I'm not sure how Jeffrey translates it.
Okay. Okay. So, but it's not needing. It's not the additional things are not space and consciousness. Okay. So, where are we? While visible, while they're derivative, the visible form is a visible object. While one must accept both of those points, we accept that. Prasangika accepts that, especially we would define it meaning conventionally, not ultimately. When it comes to presenting their suchness, the suchness of the elements and the derivatives, one recognizes that were these phenomena to exist by virtue of their own essence, if they were to be inherently existent, there would be this consequence. Either one has to admit that the four elements are perceivable by the eye, and he has in bracket, just as the derived elements are. Why is that? What kind of pervasion is that? If their derivatives that are comprised of the four great elements are perceivable by the eye, why is it necessary, if they were inherently existent, why would the elements themselves have to be perceivable by the eye? Generally, Abhidharma would say the four elements are not perceivable by the eye. They're objects of touch, right? They're tactile objects. Okay, some people thinking, some people just absorbing.
Not sure I lost track, so I'm not sure what your question was.
Okay, so why is it? It's just stating this way. There would be, so how to say this whole thing? One recognizes that were these phenomena, that's the great elements and their derivatives, if they were to exist by virtue of their own essence, if they were to be inherently existent, it would follow, there would be this consequence, logical consequence. Either one would have to admit that the four elements are perceivable by the eye, just as the derived object is. Why does that follow? Why is that a consequence if they're inherently existent?
I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Think about it. Paul, do you follow the question?
I mean, I follow the question. I'm just
Yeah,
not sure on the reason.
Okay, or the answer.
The answer, yeah. I
Okay.
mean, maybe something that because if they're inherently existent, it means the qualities would have to inhere in the parts as well. I don't know, which would then be the.
Well, when
I
we
don't
talk
know.
about if these impossible things, if production was inherently existent, and wheat comes from wheat grains, wheat seeds, then it would also follow, if it was inherently existent, would also follow that wheat would also arise from other kinds of seeds because they're inherently existent. You have to go back to that reasoning. Do you remember? You know what I'm talking about?
Sounds familiar, yeah.
Okay, so let's go a little bit further here. When one comes to appreciate this problem, so we didn't finish that. So if they were to exist, if the elements and their derivatives were to exist inherently, there would be this consequence. Either one would have to admit that the four elements are perceivable by the eye, just as the derived elements, the derived object is, the objects of sight, or that the object, the visible form, is not perceivable by the eye in the same way that its constitutive subtle elements are not. So this is what he's translating as these molecules of 8 particles that Mikhail was talking about, right? The constitutive subtle elements are not. So, oh no, it's constitutive subtle elements means the 4 great elements, I guess, right?
I assume it means that, yeah.
They are not perceivable by the eye. So there would have to be that consequence. So why is that a consequence? When it comes to appreciate this problem, so that consequence which seems wrong, because you don't want to say that the great elements are perceivable by the eye, or you don't want to admit that you don't want to admit that the 4 elements are perceivable by the eye, or that visible forms are not perceivable by the eye. You don't want to admit either of those. When one comes to appreciate this problem, one will then understand that the earlier Abhidharma statements do not present true suchness. In this way, one will realize their suchness anew and understand the earlier Abhidharma statements to be means of leading to that suchness. So if they were inherently existent, there would be these absurd consequences. If they're only conventionally existent, merely imputed by the mind, the same way when we talk about production, generation. Remember when we were talking about the sprout is produced from this, whether it's produced from itself, from something other, such as the seed, from both or neither, right? When we talk about production, if things, yeah, Mikhail.
Isn't it what Paul alluded to? The idea that if the quality is in the group, it has to be in the parts. If we talk about inherent existence, otherwise we would have a completely dependent quality arising, and that does not fit with inherent existence.
That would be true, right? But that may not be the only thing. Let me just finish this. When one comes to appreciate this problem, one will then understand that the earlier Abhidharma statements do not present true suchness. In this way, one will realize their suchness anew. One will realize the emptiness of the elements and their derivatives freshly again, and understand the earlier Abhidharma statements as being methods to lead to that suchness. Okay, the same thing with the thing that we're going to talk about in the second citation about impermanence, the relationship between impermanence and emptiness. So let me see here. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to leave that there, then go on to the next paragraph begins. The second citation on the meaning of impermanence being non-existence. Remember, right earlier we said the sutras also state that, quote, the meaning of impermanence is non-existence, or Tibetan mitak donni, the meaning of mitak, impermanence, mitakpa, medon she. So Jimpa translates it as, what does he say? The meaning of impermanence is non-existence, right? Whereas the Tibetan says, wait, let me get to the right. I'm in the wrong note here. Mitak doni, it means the meaning of impermanence, or you could take it as impermanent objects, right? Mitak dun. What do you think? Dun usually is what? Artha, right?
Meaning.
So artha sometimes refers to the object, but anyway, mitak doni, the meaning of impermanence is medon. The meaning, you could say, the meaning of impermanent, the meaning of non-existence, or it means non-existence. Or you could say it means impermanent objects or non-existent objects. Anyway, I'll leave that for a second. So that's the second citation. So the second citation on the meaning of impermanence being non-existence, medun, shows how the arising and disintegrating of things, the arisal and disintegration of things, the kewa and jikpa, indicate the absence of intrinsic existence. So when it's talking about the meaning of, the significance of impermanence is that it signifies non-inherent existence. Because if things are changing, they can't be inherently existing. The second citation on the meaning of impermanence being non-existence shows how the arising and disintegrating of things indicate the absence of intrinsic existence. If things arise, if they're generated, if they're born, and they disintegrate, every instant because they're impermanent, they can't be inherently existent, because if something is inherently existent, it doesn't depend on anything else. It doesn't depend on causes and conditions. If something were to be inherently existent, it wouldn't change. So the fact that things are recognized as impermanent shows that they are empty of inherent existence. So this was, we've mentioned sometime in the past, I think Venerable Shanka, who's retreated, had asked about this before. Was this a proof of emptiness? Impermanence is a proof of emptiness. You could say functioning things or products are impermanent because products are empty of inherent existence because they're impermanent. You could use that as a reason to prove emptiness. But the way that you prove it is that if phenomena are impermanent, they're changing moment by moment, that indicates that they could not be inherently existent. Follow? I'm not sure. Yeah, Louise.
I don't like that word non-existence, just like that. On the meaning of impermanence being the non-existence of inherent existence makes more sense, because just like that, nihilism just kind of pops up in my head. I don't think
but
it's too implicit in the
meaning. Heart Sutra, though, be generous with the Buddha. In the Heart Sutra, the Buddha said, "Zukme, dame, dime, rome." Form does not exist. Visible form does not exist. He said it.
Emptiness is not exist. No, but emptiness is not non-existent.
The context was earlier in the Heart Sutra, as we'll see. It was saying that all phenomena are not inherently existent.
There,
so
that's okay.
Has to realize that is appended to everything else.
Yeah, but that's not non-existence, which is something else entirely.
No, but the meaning. It means that's the significance when the Buddha said does not exist. That meant that they did not inherently exist. Okay. Nadine, what were you going to say?
I had exactly the same thought. I was always thinking, just because something is impermanent, it's not non-existent. Didn't make sense to me. Same, but now I understand it.
Yeah. So when it says non-existent there, what it means is not inherently existent in the sense of the Prajnaparamita Sutras. Not only the Heart Sutra, many sutras. At one point, they'll mention non-inherent existence, so that there's this particle non-existent is in that compound, non-inherently existent, or existent. There does not exist inherent existence. But later they just say does not exist. One has to understand that what is meant by does not exist means does not exist ultimately, does not exist in the sphere of emptiness, does not exist inherently. Okay. So let me read this again. The second citation on the meaning of impermanence being non-existence shows how the arising and disintegrating of things indicate the absence of intrinsic existence. Regarding those sutras that contain the truth of emptiness of intrinsic existence of persons and phenomena, that is, those that bear on emptiness, those which are, talking about emptiness, and explicitly present this truth as their subject matter, know that those are definitive in their meaning. Yeah. So this is very, very important and subtle point. So this is what we're talking about here is attested to in other sutras, especially Akshayamati Nirdesa Sutra and others that the Prasangika rely on to determine what is a definitive sutra and what is interpretable. So remember the Samdi Nimorchana Sutra that presents the Chittamatra point of view. I'm looking around. I guess we've lost Richard also somehow. It's off somewhere. The Samdi Nimorchana Sutra said that the second turning of the wheel, the Prajnaparamita Sutras, were interpretable. They were not definitive. Whereas the Prasangika says, no, excuse me, they are definitive. But the Samdi Nimorchana talked about the third wheel of Dharma, talking about the Tathagata Garbha and mind only and so forth as being definitive. Yeah, regarding those sutras that contain the truth of emptiness, intrinsic existence of persons and phenomena, that is, those that bear on emptiness and explicitly present this truth as their subject matter, know that those are definitive in their meaning. So here we've been given reminding us of what the meaning of definitive sutras or definitive citations are and what are interpretable. Only those statements that talk explicitly about emptiness are definitive. That is to say, I have to say that affirm the correct understanding of emptiness. Like, for instance, there are statements in the Samdi Nimorchana that emptiness doesn't exist the way that the Prasangika thinks. So that even though that mentions emptiness, that's not a definitive statement. It has to be correct. And anything else that may be correct, say, for instance, teachings on karma and liberation and so forth, those are to be interpreted in the sense, at least, even if they're taken literally, they're to be interpreted in the sense of not explicitly talking about emptiness. Yeah, Mikhail, sorry to wait so long.
No problem. Back to the consequence we were discussing about the elements.
Right.
I found Geshe Gedek's commentary.
Okay, please share with us if you can.
So if the four elements and their derivatives were inherently existing, the I consciousness and the body consciousness apprehending them would not depend on these objects. And each consciousness could apprehend.
So let's make sure we understand. So that means if they were inherently existent, they would not be causal phenomena. They would be permanent, and therefore they would not have effects. So they would not be, they could not bring about the effect of eye consciousness or tactile consciousness.
Yeah.
Okay, so continue.
They cannot be the midgen, the objective
Condition.
condition. Yeah. And so if that were the case, if they were inherently existent, they would not depend on them. And so each consciousness could apprehend either both types or none of them.
Right. Okay, good. Good explanation. Okay. Does that help? Paul, I think you had, or maybe John had some qualm about that, or maybe Subhash.
My only remaining qualm is whether they think that you actually, although you can perceive aspects of the great elements, it's not possible to, they're abstractions, they can't be directly perceived.
According to, yeah, so is that the case? They're abstractions. According to Abhidharma, they are the fundamental atoms that make up materiality, right? You know, the sights and smells and tastes and tactile objects. And the combination of them, along with some other fundamental atoms, are actually existent materially. They're not just abstractions. I don't think the Prasangika rejects that entirely. They reject that they exist inherently or truly the way that the lower schools believe, but it does believe, as I understand it, in these four elements and the derivatives and so forth. Paul, do you know? Does that sound?
Yeah, I mean that sounds reasonable to me. I mean, John, what's your source on the abstraction?
Not, it's just a kind of a pedestrian view of it that we never experience just the great element water.
Right, but you could say we
standalone.
never experience the element carbon, or
Right. Right.
that-
Yeah.
I
It's a
think it's the same
constituent.
sort of
It's
thing.
not
Yeah.
an abstraction. That's the wrong word. It's a constituent element. Yeah. I follow.
Okay, so yeah, it takes some thinking. This is what I mentioned when those geshes who went all the way to get the Larampa Geshe degree, the highest of the Geshe degrees, they would often, in their after they graduated and so forth, they would, when they met for tea or meals or something, they would always discuss these kinds of things, even from the Abhidharma. So these are still things that still, you can, when you visit Paul in New York, John, or Paul, you visit John, you can discuss these things over tea and crumpets, Okay, anyway, so for instance, Jimpa continues, translating Lama Tsongkhapa. For instance, the King of Meditative Sutras, King of Meditation Sutra, King of Meditations Sutra. So what is this? Samadhi Raja Sutra. It teaches the following. And what is this? This is, so this is interesting because in the 84,000.org translation of this verse, it says it's from chapter 7, verse 9, in the 84,000 translation for some reason. But in the Jose Cabezon's translation, in Dose of Emptiness, on page 77, it says it is chapter 7, verse 5, not verse 9. And also in, I think, Jeffrey Hopkins' translation of this verse in Meditation on Emptiness. I thought I had it quoted right here. He also says it's chapter 7, verse 5. But anyway, let's read this verse. So this is what? From the Samadhi Raja, right? Through emptiness as taught by the Tathagata. So that's an error right there, John. Paul, you were asking about. It actually says Sugata, right? In the Tibetan. Tongpa Dewa Shekpe Shepatar. Dewa Shekpe. So that's the Sugata, not the Tathagata. Through emptiness is taught by the Sugata, the specificity of the definitive sutras will be known. Oh, what he's translating here, specificity, is chetak, means particular. That means those sutras which you can point out particularly as being definitive sutra. You know them through the fact that emptiness is being taught. When the Sugata, the Buddha, taught emptiness. Where sentience, that's Tibetan semchen, so usually we translate it as sentient being. When sentience, person, and individual are mentioned, so those are all synonyms of person, right? Those are known to be provisional in meaning. So this is a famous verse from the Samadhi Raja Sutra, either verse 5 or 9, depending on the enumeration. So what does that mean? Let's see here. Yeah. So Jose Cabezon's translation of that on page 77 says, so he also translates it incorrectly. He says the Tathagata's teachings on emptiness should be known as examples of sutras of definitive meaning. Whatever ones teach about beings, personality, or man should be known as the doctrine of provisional meaning. And the 84,000 translation of that verse is, they know the particular sutra, the chetak, with the definitive meaning, such as the Sugata's teachings on emptiness. They know that all the dharmas that teach on beings, individuals, and persons are provisional truth. Okay, so Lama Tsong Khapa's commentary. Oh, let me just read this and the next verse, and then we will stop. Sorry, I've gone over. Jimpa says, the specificity of sutras, in that quotation above from the Samadhi Raja, where it says the specificity can be translated as particular, chetak. The specificity of sutras indicates their distinction from the provisional sutras. That is, you have interpretable sutras and you have definitive sutras, and they are particularities of sutras. When we talk about the Vaibhashika system, the Chetamawa, Cheta means particular. So sometimes Chetamawa, the Vaibhashikas are called the particularists, just from the name, although it has to do that they rely on the Mahavipasha scripture. At any rate, that's what's meant. When you have a generality of sutras, you have particular kind of sutras. Chetak, one specific kind that are definitive, and another specific kind that are interpretable. So the specificity of sutras indicates their distinction from the provisional sutras. The reference to person and so on are only examples. It also indicates those scriptures that speak of the existence of an agent, the object of an action, as well as the acts. What was it? Jaje Lesum. Remember that when we talked about these things before? This citation from the King of Meditation Sutra is then a scriptural source for differentiating sutras into two classes of provisional and definitive meaning. So this is one of the many sources that there are two kinds of sutras, those that are definitive and those are interpretable. And then another quote from the Samadhi Raja. It says, in the thousandfold world systems, all the teachings I've taught consist of different words, but one meaning. But this one truth cannot be uttered. That's how Jimpa translates that. Yeah, that's good enough. Then he says, when you contemplate this one thing, that is emptiness, you will be meditating on all other teachings. So the numerous teachings of all the Buddhas, all those who have been taught, are about the selflessness of all phenomena. If a person versed in meaning trains in this essential point, it won't be hard to find the Buddha's attributes. Okay, so we're going to end there. That's where we're going to begin next time with this, this statement about the specificity of sutras. Let me make that green on my highlight here. That's where we'll start next time. Yeah, this is a tough section. Geshe Zopa, in his commentary on these sections, said this was hard. Also, Lama Tsongkhapa says it's hard. And in Jimba's notes also says it's hard. So if your teeth, your Dharma teeth are getting crunched on by these dry bones, that's understandable. They're particularly crispy here. So before we dedicate, anyone have a question? Anything you need to have resolved? Doris.
I had that last line of the four-line verse at the start that says, this one truth cannot be uttered. I had that highlighted. I don't know what that means.
Let me get back to that. But this one truth cannot be uttered. So yeah, so which one is this? That's that. Jikten kamni tongtaktu ngaye chunam gangsungba ikitade don chikte. So all of the words have one meaning. Yongsu takbar nupayen. Yongsu takbar nupayen. I don't have what Venerable Joan translated that here, but I will, let me check, and we'll have for discussion on Monday, and we'll finish up next
Thank
week.
you, Venerable.
So Paul's cat is receiving karmic imprints, deep karmic imprints. Who knows whether Paul will be his or her guru in next life, or whether they will be Paul's guru, but they've got a karmic connection with the definitive and interpretive meanings of the sutras. Okay, so let's dedicate our virtues. If you want to go to the dedication section, there we go. Due to these virtues. So when you're dedicating, you're meditating. You're trying to link up the virtues that we've imagined we've created, right? The collection of merit and wisdom. Due to these virtues, as a result of that, it's kind of like a prayer. May I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha. May I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. So through that aspiration, we're wanting this karma to ripen in that way, to bring about our Buddhahood in order to benefit ourselves and others. May the supreme, due to these merits, due to these virtues, may the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. And peerless teacher and assembly of children of the victorious ones, Bodhisattvas, Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, together with your lineages, all the objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please bestow here and now the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. May this prayer become reality. In upholding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, I make request. Sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the victorious one's teachings and for the welfare of mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. You passed away, at which point I lost hope. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the Triple Gem and the great waves of the mind generation of the children of the victorious ones, the great waves of bodhicitta of the Bodhisattvas, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. And finally, for all of our gurus, our primordial gurus, present gurus, future gurus, past gurus, whether they be physical form, for instance, future gurus are not physically present now, or the past ones are not, but whether we imagine receiving the inspiration and teachings from the Buddha as our guru, viewing all of these, you who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, supreme gateways for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means, moved by mercy, illuminating spiritual friends, I make requests to live long and stable lives. Okay. So stunningly, difficult times to keep the mind calm. I hope tomorrow is the full moon of Sakadawa, karmic multiplying day. So if you have a chance to do virtuous actions tomorrow, the results will be multiplied, enormously. Yeah. So I look forward to seeing you the day after tomorrow, on Monday. We'll talk about some of these things. And certainly next Saturday. Thank you all very much.
Thank
See
you,
you.
Venerable George.
Thank you, Venerable George.